I called out to my daughter and hubby. They had been ignoring me for a solid month now. It was really painful. I had no idea what was causing it. I felt invisible at home until I finally understood they were ignoring me. Did you hear something, Dad? No, it's most likely your imagination. Despite being able to see and hear me plainly, my husband and daughter continued to ignore me. They pretended that I wasn't even there. I made the decision to leave home because I could take it no more. 5 years later, I unexpectedly received my retribution. Natalie Smith is my name. I'm 50 years old. Along with my husband Jackson and our daughter Ruby. I used to be a typical stay-at-home mother. 23 years ago, Jackson and I met at work, both of us making a nice salary. We didn't have to worry about money and were comfortable. We brought our healthy daughter Ruby into the world on my 30th birthday, and she grew up without any significant health issues. After Ruby was born, I became a stay-at-home mother. Jackson disagreed with my decision to return to work after a year. Do you really have to return to work? Natalie, he inquired. I believe I ought to, for Ruby's sake. I answered, I can support us, and my salary is good. However, wouldn't saving money be preferable? We have a lot of money saved up, he said. He went on, I want you to concentrate on our daughter and the house. I made the decision to resign from my position after much deliberation. My days of taking care of the house and being a mom started at that point. To be honest, it wasn't until Lena was born that I realized how difficult parenting might be. For Ruby's sake, I had to continue nursing every few hours, even if it left me sleep-deprived and sometimes without an appetite. It was also difficult to balance duties. I attempted to finish them while Ruby slept, but I was usually so tired that I ended myself falling asleep as well. Jackson left things to me most of the time, but he did help sometimes. The days went by, with him taking over when Ruby was quiet and giving her back when she sobbed. Ruby became 16 in a flash. She approached me following her sweet 16 celebration. We decided to buy a new outfit since you didn't want to rent one. Do you recall I said that's why we didn't employ a photographer? What? Why not? Every one of my pals had one. Ruby cried out. However, I pointed out that you can't get a photographer for free. When I was a child, I didn't care about it. Shouldn't parents take care of that? She shot back. Jackson detected the tension as soon as he arrived from work. What's happening? He inquired. The only one who didn't turn to him was me, and Ruby came to him to complain. I didn't want to rent a dress, according to Mom. Is that reasonable? I understand your disappointment, Jackson added. You would want one if all of your buddies had one. I'll get a photographer to take pictures of you wearing your dress. I'll cover the expense. Really? I'm grateful, Dad. I cherish you. Ruby gave a joyful shout, turned away from me, and left the living room. Jackson appeared too willing to give in to Ruby, so I couldn't resist going up to him. Hold on a second. Why do you decide things like way without consulting me? I questioned him. What's so important? Just pictures, he said nonchalantly. Only pictures. Are you aware of the high cost of hiring a photographer? It may cost more than $1,000. I cried out. After all, Ruby wants it, so shouldn't you foot the bill? Jackson answered, startling me with his unanticipated recommendation. What? Did I just blurt out in shock? I'm the one supporting the family, you know, he continued cynically. You don't help pay for our bills, that's accurate. But I clarified that I had been using my funds to meet the majority of Ruby's requirements ever before she was born. Quit talking. Just follow my instructions. You're not cleaning around here. So who do you think you are? Then go. Now that you're unemployed, how do you plan to make ends meet? Jackson would smile and mock me. There was some truth in what he said, as annoying as it was. As Ruby became older, Jackson continued to find excuses to keep me from going back to work. So I continued to be unemployed. When we were married, I had about $100,000 in money, but now I had less than $20,000. It would be difficult for me to make it alone if I left now. I was silent when I realized that. As Jackson gleefully stated, you can't manage without me. I gritted my teeth. You understand? Simply follow my instructions. Don't dispute with me once again. For Ruby's picture session, be sure to hire a photographer. All right, indeed. As he threw aside his suit and made his way to the restroom, I said softly. Anger bubbled inside me as I handed over his outfit. What was the purpose of this? How much more would Jackson and Ruby ruin me? Being a stay-at-home mother was never my goal. I decided to start working from home just in case after giving it some thought. To which Jackson said dismissively, do whatever you want. I thus began working at a job that was inside our tax rate. The final cost of Ruby's photo shoot was $1,500. It was costly since she insisted on having all the photo data and the largest printed picture. Oh, I look terrible in this, Ruby said, glancing at the printed photo. I'm far more attractive than that. Don't say that. The photographer put a lot of effort into getting this picture for you. Perhaps the studio was initially at fault. Mom, you picked that location. When you were free, it was the only one available. I'd give up apologizing. Just throw this image away somewhere, since I doubt I'll ever look at it again. What are you saying? I mumbled, my voice quivering with grief and rage, but I knew I shouldn't feel emotional at that moment since I'm a mother. I went to the kitchen and took a deep breath to help me relax while fighting back tears. I had no idea that things would become worse. I prepared breakfast as normal the following day, but neither Jackson nor Ruby ever came downstairs. I heard them talking as they walked down the stairs, just as I was going to go see how they were doing. Where are we having breakfast, Dad? How about that cafe beside the station, maybe? I've heard their breakfasts are excellent. I'd want to see the place. When they both put on their shoes and made their way to the front door, Jackson said, "Okay, let's go." Then I yelled, "Wait a second," in confusion and frustration. "It's time for breakfast. Can't you hear me, Ruby? Come on. Let's eat." However, they didn't answer. Their happy words trailed off when the door slammed shut. I was unable to comprehend what was happening. This was not the only time. Every time I reached out to them, they ignored me. Why would they both harm me like this? Was there something else going on? Or did they actually not hear me? They went out to have supper without me and ignored the food I had prepared, but later that night they came home together. They each headed directly to their rooms. Day after day, this pattern persisted, and it devastated me. Their conduct remained unchanged for a month. Then one day in the living room, I discovered finalized divorce paperwork. What does this signify? Jackson and Ruby cheerfully ate pizza and watched a movie together, ignoring my question as usual. It dawned on me then. Everything I had been suppressing boiled over. I eventually spoke up, tears running down my cheeks in a frantic terror. Why won't you both respond to me? I begged, but no one answered. They ignored me entirely and continued to laugh and watch the film. I had no idea what had set this off. My husband and daughter were ignoring me in our own house by the time I knew it. I shouted out, "You're supposed to be my family, but it feels like I'm invisible here." "Did you hear something, Dad?" They ignored me, despite the fact that they could plainly see and hear me. "Therefore it's simply your imagination." They pretended that I was non-existent. I was at my breaking point. I stuffed my carry-on with only the necessities, grabbed the divorce papers, and walked out of the home silently. I traveled an hour or so by rail to my folks' house. My parents are fortunately still living and content with their retirement. They were shocked to see me carrying bags, but once I gave them the rundown, they embraced me. "You've gone through a lot, Natalie, I can tell. We apologize for not noticing earlier." My parents answered graciously. "You can stay here as long as you need to get back on your feet." That day, I was moved to tears by what they said. I hadn't sobbed that publicly in decades before then. I changed my name from Smith to Adams, my maiden name, and filed for divorce the next day. I was a little lonely, but I was able to control my feelings and began looking for work. It was intimidating. I questioned if there was still a place for me in the workforce at 50 after quitting at 30 and having a 20-year gap in my working experience. That's quite a twist, indeed. This is a revised version. I was appreciative that the first employer I applied to employed me right away. They appreciated my prior expertise working for a reputable organization, and I quickly found myself managing significant tasks. I became an expert at my position during the following 5 years and started mentoring new employees. Harris, a coworker who was about my daughter Ruby's age, and I grew close. I liked talking to him, and it was like having a son. His mother, who was approximately my age, became a close friend, and we discussed everything from personal to professional issues. One day Harris, who is currently in his 3rd year with the organization, gave me an envelope. "What is this?" Curious, I asked. "I'm getting married, and I really want you to come to my wedding," he remarked with a bashful smile. "Well done. I wish I could be there. I'm grateful." I gave a kind response. I was astounded when I opened the invitation when I arrived home. Ruby Smith, who is my daughter, was the bride. "I take it you're kidding? Could this be a coincidence?" I shouted out loud. My phone rang at that very moment. Jackson was the one. "Hi, it's been a long time." "How are you doing?" he said nonchalantly. "What are your desires?" I snapped back. "Don't be like that unexpectedly," Jackson said. "You should attend Ruby's wedding." "What topic are you discussing? We're no longer together." I said. "I can't just show up and act like nothing's wrong. Come on, please." Before I could reply, he ended the phone and stated, "I'll send the invitation to your parents' house as Ruby's mother. I had no plans to go to her wedding." But I was already going to be there, I'd told Harris. To refuse now would be impolite. I made the grudging decision to go in light of it. Because Harris worked for me, I was a visitor on the groom's side on the wedding day, which was 2 months later. Only members of the immediate family attended the private ceremony. The reception was to be attended by guests. In the family area, I saw a vacant seat. Jackson hadn't seen me yet, apparently. They started introducing themselves to each table as the bride and groom's opening film came to an end. Harris came over to our table and greeted us warmly. He said joyfully, "Thank you so much for coming today." Ruby's face became white with surprise next to him. When Jackson realized this, he hurried over in shock. "What's happening? You're sitting here, but why?" Panicked, he demanded. Everybody in the room looked at us. Harris inquired curiously, watching the tense moment. "Do you know Ms. Adams, please?" In a hurry, Jackson said, "She's Ruby's mother." "What?" Harris said bewilderedly. "But I was told Ruby's mother left the family and abandoned them." "That's not true," I firmly interrupted. It turned out that Jackson and Ruby had made up a plot to make me the bad guy. Their faces were etched with shame as they stood there. I made the decision to correct the record. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth sooner, Harris. I am Natalie Adams, Ruby's mother." "Did you truly desert Ruby and her spouse?" In pursuit of clarification, Harris inquired. "That is not true. My husband and daughter regarded me like a cleaner at home, and ultimately they stopped paying attention to me." "Disregarded?" "Yes, it continued for a month until I was at my breaking point." I took the divorce papers that Jackson had previously prepared and walked out. I wasn't the one that went. They shoved me aside. "Why did you disregard your mother, Ruby?" I wanted an explanation, so I asked. Ruby said defiantly, her grin fading. "Dad and I chose to ignore her since she was bothersome in every way. After only a month, she departed." "Isn't that amusing?" She gave a cold response. "Are you serious, Ruby? Everything is all right, you won't mind it." In an attempt to dismiss the matter, Ruby smiled and stated, "Just think of me as not having a mother." However, Harris was unable to remain mute due to his obvious anger. "What do you say? This is a severe matter." Harris responded in a disappointed tone. "I never knew you could be so heartless." Startled by his response, Ruby answered bewilderedly. "What?" Obviously, she hadn't anticipated Harris's support for me. Harris withdrew from Ruby's touch, his voice firm and icy. "This is the end of the engagement," Harris firmly said. "I'm glad I saw your true colors before we got married." "What? You can't be serious, can you?" Shocked, Ruby objected. "Keep your hands off of me. Never again do I want to be with someone as ruthless as you." "The wedding has been called off," Harris said sternly, interrupting the conversation. "No." With a heartfelt apology, Harris took the microphone and spoke to the attendees. He told them to return their presents and go, saying, "I'm extremely sorry. Please don't leave, everyone." Rudy let out a sorrowful cry, but the visitors left him with icy looks. I was ready to follow them out when Jackson came up to me. "Do something, Natalie," he begged desperately. "What? Why ought I to? Isn't this something you did? You don't feel bad for ruining Ruby's wedding?" I shot back, unable to contain my laughter. "Why is it so funny?" Jackson screamed, becoming angrier. "The whole comedy of it. I have absolutely no sympathy for Ruby. This is something you both caused. You deserve this," I firmly said. "How is Ruby's marriage doing?" His voice was worried as he pressed. "I don't give a damn. I'm just relieved that my important teammate Harris is not forced to wed someone like Ruby. He is worthy of someone far superior. Goodbye. I will never see you again." After saying that, I left the venue without turning around. Knowing that I had taken the proper choice gave me a wave of relief. The engagement between Ruby and Harris was later canceled. As it came out, Ruby had been a temporary worker who intended to leave her position in order to be married. Ruby began spending excessively on designer goods as a coping mechanism for her stress, because she had no steady source of income and was now single. Jackson, however, had to spend all of his savings to maintain Ruby's way of life. Their unsustainable way of life was obviously on the verge of collapse. I felt emancipated at last from those responsibilities. Without being constrained by their drama, I want to concentrate on living life to the fullest and seeking my own happiness going ahead.